All right, let's jump right in. When we think about war, the first thing that comes to mind is destruction, and for good reason. But what if there's more to it? What if the clash of armies, as brutal as it is, has also been one of the most powerful engines for human innovation in all of history? Well, that's the strange paradox we're going to unpack today.
So is it? I mean, when we picture conflict, we see chaos, we see ruin, and look, that is absolutely a huge part of the story. But it is not the whole story, because underneath all that violence, there's a fascinating, powerful exchange going on.
You see, Conquest, for all its horrors, forces this incredibly high-stakes conversation between different cultures. It shoves people together and forces both sides, the winner and the loser, to learn, to adapt, and ultimately, to create something totally new out of the fire of that conflict.
And that's what we're calling war's creative paradox. It's this unseen exchange happening right there on the battlefield. It's where that desperate need to either survive or to completely dominate your enemy, well, it forces a super rapid and often radical evolution in tactics, in technology, and sometimes in culture itself. Okay, but how does this actually work? Right? How does a military idea actually jump from one army to another? To really get a handle on that, we need a quick look at the theory behind how these things spread. It's our toolkit for understanding this whole process.
The main idea here is something called diffusion, and it's pretty simple, really. It's just the spread of cultural traits, things like a battle formation or a new kind of sword, from one group to another. And let me tell you, nothing accelerates that spread quite like the intense life-or-death pressure of a war. Now, this diffusion tends to happen in three main ways. First, you've got direct contact. That's literally just soldiers seeing what the other army is doing across the field. Then there's intermediate contact, where ideas get passed along by third parties, like mercenaries or traders. And then there's stimulus diffusion, which honestly is the coolest one. That's when you see what your enemy is doing, and instead of just copying them, you get inspired to invent something brand new, to completely crush their idea.
But here's the thing. Nobody just copies and pastes a tactic. It's not that simple. It always has to go through a process of adaptation. I mean, a battle formation that works on a wide open plain, it's going to be useless in a dense forest. You have to tweak it, you have to tailor it to your new reality.
And all of this leads to the final and most creative step, syncretism. This is where the magic really happens. It's when different ideas don't just get tweaked, they actually get blended together to create something entirely new and often way more powerful. It's like a military mashup that can literally change the way wars are fought. Okay, that's enough theory. Let's see how all this, diffusion, adaptation, and syncretism, actually played out in the real world. We're going to dive into 3 historical case studies that are just perfect examples of this whole cycle of conflict-driven innovation. First up, the legendary Macedonian phalanx. I want you to picture a human hedgehog, a disciplined wall of soldiers holding these massive 13 to 18-foot-long pikes called the sarissa. If you were facing this thing head-on, it was basically an unstoppable meat grinder, especially with Alexander the Great's elite cavalry protecting its flanks. But, and this is a big but, it had a fatal flaw. It was incredibly rigid. On rough ground, or if you could just get around to its sides, the whole thing would just fall apart. And this is exactly where the Romans came in. They saw the phalanx, but they didn't copy it. Instead, in a classic case of stimulus diffusion, they developed a brilliant counter, the legion. It was a more flexible, more adaptable system of soldiers with swords and shields that could just swarm the phalanx and beat it in messy, close-quarters combat. And the thing is, this was a two-way street. As the Romans pushed deeper into Europe, they ran into Germanic tribes. These guys learned how to exploit Roman supply lines and create more organized defenses. And the Romans? They learned a ton from the tribes about fighting in forests and the importance of ambushes. It was this constant, brutal feedback loop where both sides were forced to get smarter. All right, case number 2, the Mongols. These guys were a whole different animal. Their entire way of war was built on insane mobility. Imagine this ocean of horse archers flowing across the battlefield, mastering tactics like the feigned retreat to lure their enemies into a trap and then just annihilate them. But here's the thing. Their true genius wasn't just that they were incredible riders. It was their amazing ability to adapt and blend technologies. See, as nomads, they were terrible at taking walled cities. So what did they do? They conquered places like China and Persia, captured their best engineers, and forced them to build the most advanced siege weapons the world had ever seen. They were masters of syncretism, blending their nomadic warfare with the best tech from settled civilizations. And because of this, they ended up being this massive conduit for technology transfer. Gunpowder, for example, was developed in China, but it was the Mongol conquests that basically acted like a superhighway, fast-tracking its journey west. They ended up connecting the world militarily and setting the stage for the next great revolution in warfare.
So, we've seen how this process works, but it is so important that we zoom out here and talk about the other side of this coin, the immense human cost. This cycle of innovation is fueled by incredible violence, and it has these profound, often devastating consequences for entire societies.
And this gets to the really tough ethical question at the heart of this whole paradox. All these innovations we've talked about, a more efficient Roman legion, devastating Mongol tactics, the spread of gunpowder, they are, by definition, advancements in the technology of killing people. They're born from unimaginable suffering. So can we ever really call that kind of advancement a purely good thing? It's a deeply uncomfortable truth to sit with.
And you know, adopting these new ways of fighting, it's not just about getting new weapons. It's a massive social challenge. I mean, think about the Roman legions again. Their success was built on an incredible amount of social trust and discipline. If a society doesn't have the right leadership, or if its culture just resists foreign ideas, even the best tactics in the world are going to fail.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, it's that this cycle of conflict, diffusion, and innovation, it's not just ancient history. It is a pattern that has a long, long echo that we can still hear today.
In other words, the history of war is really this ongoing conversation, this dialectic between a new idea and the response to that idea. And conquest, for all its horror, has always been the ultimate catalyst, forcing that conversation to happen faster and on a bigger and bigger scale. And that really leaves us with one last question for you to think about. Look at our world right now, at things like drone warfare, cyber attacks, all the geopolitical tensions. How is this ancient cycle of conflict and innovation still driving technology and still shaping the power dynamics that are going to define our future? The game has been the same for centuries. It's only the pieces that have changed.